So the next step is we're going to create the patrolling behavior for our flyer enemy. And to do that, I'm going to move my PlayMaker window down here for a minute. And I am going to select the flyer enemy, and we are going to, here it is, cute little horseshoe crab shaped killer robot. And so what we're going to do is we are going to add a state machine to the flyer enemy. Now, before we do that, the flyer enemy is already set up with a Nav Mesh Agent component, which is allowing it to navigate the scene. So if we look quickly at the navigation window, we will see that we've created a nav mesh for our scene, which is a graph of the walkable area in our scene, right? The blue areas are walkable. So our flyer is going to traverse the walkable space based on destinations that we send to the Nav Mesh Agent component, right? So that's what we're going to be leveraging the Nav Mesh navigation systems of Unity and then just passing in destinations from PlayMaker. So we're going to close the navigation window. And so we are going to add, right-click, and add a finite state machine. And this is going to be called Flyer Controller. And so again, right, we get our start and our first state. And so we're going to call the first state Patrol 1. And in this state, we are going to move towards our first waypoint, waypoint 1. We're going to evaluate if we have gotten close enough to it. If we have, we are going to then change states to a Patrol 2 state and move to our waypoint 2 state. We're going to check if we're close enough, and then we're going to go back to waypoint 1, right? So we're going to patrol back and forth between two waypoints. So the first thing that we need to do, we want to set the property on our Nav Mesh Agent for its destination. We want to set the destination property for where it's going to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an action. If we type property, we can set property, right? And now we can drag in our Nav Mesh Agent into the target object, and this gives us a list of its properties, right? And the property that we want to set is going to be the destination, and we want to set it as a vector 3. So here we have a value that we could just type in, right, the coordinates of our waypoint, but let's actually get the transform position from the waypoint and set it via a variable. So we're going to add a get property, and the target object is going to be waypoint 1, and the property is going to be transform position, and we're going to get it as a vector 3. Once we've gotten it, we're going to store it in a new variable, which is going to be called next destination. And we can do these every frame. We don't strictly need to, but I think it'll be more flexible if we do. So now we want to set the value not to a hard-coded value, but to our next destination variable. And now if we start, we should see that our cute little killer robot is off to waypoint 1. It's in the Patrol 1 state, right? It's found the coordinates and set them in the destination, right? So we're off to a good start. It can make it there, but we also need it to be able to evaluate if it has gotten close enough to turn around and go to the next waypoint. So we are going to add another action called, if we type distance, it's called get distance. And the target for get distance is going to be waypoint 1. And so we're going to store the result, the distance between the owner, right, the flyer enemy, and the target in a new variable. And we'll call this distance to target. And so this is going to be a float. We're definitely going to want to do this every frame. And now we're going to use, again, from the action browser, a float compare action. And the float that we're going to compare is going to be our distance to target, right? So we're going to choose use variable, and then we're going to select distance to target. And we're going to check if we are within 1 unity unit of the target, right? If we've gotten close enough to the target to say that we've arrived there. So in this case, we're going to use less than, right? So if the distance to the target is less than 1, then we are going to create a new event called arrived at destination. And now we can add a transition for that. We're going to do this every frame, right? Again, it's important. And so now we have the ability to, and you can actually see that PlayMaker is drawing a nice gizmo for us saying get distance. The distance here is 17, right? To waypoint 1. Now what we're going to do is we are going to just copy Control C or Command C and paste. Now when we go to paste, it says the template defines a start state. Do you want to replace the current start state? Meaning, do we want the new state that we create to take over being the start state? No, actually we don't. We want to go to Patrol 1 first. So now we have Patrol 1 and Patrol 2. For Patrol 2, we just need to change the waypoints, right? So we're going to drag in waypoint 2 and waypoint 2. Waypoint 2 for the target object to get for the destination, and waypoint 2 for the target to calculate the distance to. Now, all we need to do is drag a transition from arrived at destination from Patrol 1 to Patrol 2, and then drag from Patrol 2 to Patrol 1, right? So now we should be able to walk to one waypoint. Once we've arrived there, turn around and head to the next. So let's enter play mode and test. And it looks like, yeah. Oh, I had the reason it was showing the distance to here is I had that one highlighted. So anyway, we can see it's working, right? So it's getting the distance to here. And then once it gets within the acceptable range, it's going to turn around and transition back to the original state and patrol. Right, so we're off to a good start there. We've got our enemy moving between the two positions. The next step is to give our enemy the capacity to look into the scene and to detect when the player is in front of them. And we're going to do that using something called array cast. And we'll do that in the next segment. Some folks talking about why do it every frame. If you're worried about the performance, you could turn that off. If you know that the waypoints are static, we are later going to use the same stuff to pursue the player who's going to be moving. And you might want to have moving waypoints. But yeah, feel free to turn it off if you're concerned about it. Vince McCork asks, how might one share behaviors between two different enemies in PlayMaker? You can create a template out of a graph and then use that to apply to multiple different game objects, or you could just copy the component with that state machine and just add the component. Global variables are stored in a scriptable object, which is an asset in our project, right? Local variables are stored within the FSM, right? So the global variables are going to be accessible between multiple state machines.